ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that Anna had fled Windermere with a memory so fractured and terrifying that even she could barely distinguish what had been real and what had been twisted inside her mind. Yet every step she took away from that island felt like a violent echo of something unfinished, rising behind her. The cold air outside had struck her like a waking blow, but escape did not free her. It only peeled open a deeper horror embedded into her thoughts. A horror implanted by months of psychological manipulation, deprivation, and experiments she still could not name, as she stumbled into the world she once trusted. She carried a truth so raw and unstable that the simple act of keeping it inside felt like another form of imprisonment. And when she finally found Felicia shaking, exhausted but alive, there was no relief, only a crushing urgency. Because Anna knew her escape was not the end, but the trigger for a much darker chain of events. What she revealed to Felicia was not a confession or a theory. It was a warning that everything they believed about the past weeks had been altered at its foundation, rewritten by forces meticulous enough to rearrange memories, timelines, and even the motivations of the people involved. Anna confessed that Windermere had been more than a prison. It had been a laboratory of control where her captors reshaped fragments of her perception, adjusting moments and inserting new ones until she doubted her own instincts, making her question whether Britt and Nathan had truly returned or whether their appearances had been orchestrated through methods she couldn't comprehend. This new form of manipulation, both psychological and neurological, had been designed not just to break her, but to reroute the future of everyone connected to her, creating ripple effects that would spread through Port Charles long after her escape. Felicia listened, horrified, realizing that Anna wasn't simply traumatized. She was carrying a secret that could destabilize everything they thought they understood about the conspiracy orbiting the WSB Sidwell and the resurgence of the Faison legacy. The deeper Anna spoke, the clearer it became that her memories had been tampered with deliberately. Not erased, but rearranged, like a puzzle forced into the wrong shape. And the worst part was that she did not know which pieces were true or which had been manufactured. She only knew that her captors had made a mistake by letting her live long enough to feel the inconsistencies pressing through her mind like splintered glass. That mistake had allowed her to see patterns. They tried to hide patterns, suggesting a new, calculated evolution in the power structure surrounding Port Charles. Anna's escape had not been anticipated. It had accelerated a plan still half-formed. Felicia sensed this, sensing how every tremor in Anna's voice hinted that the people behind this operation were not simply torturers or extremists. They were strategists, preparing to unleash something orchestrated with painstaking precision. And now Anna, barely coherent yet fiercely aware, was warning that her return to the mainland would trigger their next move. Her survival was the catalyst they had accounted for, the variable that forced them to activate a secondary stage of their design. Felicia felt the weight of this realization crushing down on her, that freeing Anna might have set into motion a transformation more dangerous than anything they had yet encountered. Anna's memories pulsed like volatile explosives, fragments of conversations, glimpses of scientific equipment, voices urging her to forget and remember simultaneously. What she carried was a secret about what had been done to her mind, a revelation that someone was rewriting the future by altering the past in the consciousness of key individuals. And now that she was outside Windermere, the consequences of that knowledge were beginning to manifest, pushing events forward with a momentum she and Felicia could no longer control. Every adjustment her captors had made, every hallucination induced, every memory warped was now unraveling in real time, reshaping the actions of those around her and pushing the crisis into a new and unpredictable phase. Anna's escape, instead of closing a chapter, had ignited the fuse of something vast and calculated. And Felicia realized that the nightmare had not followed Anna out of Windermere. Anna had unknowingly brought it with. Anna's escape from Windermere had been brutal, imperfect, and soaked in terror. But freedom did not bring relief. It brought clarity, and clarity was far more dangerous than captivity. In the days since she staggered out of the shadows of that island, flashes of memory once twisted by drugs, deprivation, and psychological manipulation had begun to fall back into place. And with every recovered fragment came a deeper sense of impending catastrophe. One detail kept returning sharper each time, refusing to be ignored. Someone inside the PCPD had betrayed her. It was not a suspicion born of paranoia or trauma-induced doubt, but a precise recollection extracted from the haze of her imprisonment. A voice she remembered hearing outside her cell. A comment too specific, too internal. Something only a person with access to police operations would ever know. That voice had guided her captors, redirected the search effort, ensured that Windermere remained unbreached for months. It meant her suffering had never been caused solely by Sidwell Cullum, or the twisted resurrection of the Faison legacy. It had been enabled by someone wearing a badge Anna once trusted. And with that realization, a new fear entered her bloodstream, colder than anything she had endured in captivity. The crisis was no longer confined to Windermere. It had already spread into the heart of Port Charles. The most chilling part was how seamlessly the traitor had woven themselves into the structure of the department, manipulating evidence, stalling warrants, misdirecting search teams, and creating just enough bureaucratic fog to ensure that no one questioned why Anna Devane, one of the most skilled agents the WSB had ever produced, could vanish without a trace. But Anna was no longer confused or disoriented. She was awakening piece by piece. And with each regained memory came the understanding that the conspiracy was far more calculated than she first believed. The new mechanisms of control, she sensed the patterns of interference embedded in recent PCPD cases. And the sudden shifts in departmental priorities proved that someone was orchestrating events from inside, guiding Port Charles toward a disaster no one else could foresee. And Anna knew that if she did not act, if she did not expose the traitor soon, the catastrophe would not simply unfold, it would consume everything she once vowed to protect. Felicia was the first person Anna dared to confide in, not because she was the closest, but because she was unconnected to the PCPD chain of command, and therefore beyond the saboteur's influence. Felicia listened in horrified silence as Anna recounted fragments of overheard conversations during her imprisonment, orders that matched PCPD, procedural language updates on internal investigations only an officer would know, and deliberate misinformation fed to the department to steer them away from the island. At first, Felicia believed Anna's memory might still be unreliable, scarred by trauma and hallucinations induced by months under Sidwell's psychological torture. But as Anna continued describing specific phrasing, procedural terminology, and subtle behavior patterns, Felicia recognized something far more terrifying. Anna was not guessing, she was remembering. And those memories aligned eerily well with inconsistencies Felicia herself had noticed, but dismissed as departmental. Chaos. The betrayal was real. The crisis was active. And the traitor was still in place. That realization tightened a noose around both women as they began digging deeper. Not through official channels, but through cross-referencing case files, Anna recalled, with moments Felicia had witnessed firsthand. They noticed patterns evidence routinely disappearing when connected to Sidwell's operations. Officers reassigned at suspicious times, internal reports quietly rewritten to match false narratives. Every discovery pushed them closer to the precipice of something enormous, an internal collapse engineered from within. Orchestrated with such precision that even Anna, with all her training, had failed to see it until now. But Anna also recognized something else. Her suffering at Windermere had conditioned her mind not into weakness, but into an uncomfortable form of sharpness. The psychological games meant to break her had instead heightened her awareness, making her hyper-attuned to patterns of manipulation. She could sense intention behind every shift in the PCPD's behavior. She could feel pressure in places no one else noticed, and she understood that her escape had triggered the traitor's next move. She wasn't meant to survive long enough to speak. Her freedom disrupted the timeline, and disruption meant the enemy would accelerate. Now every hour mattered. Every lead mattered. Every hesitation could cost lives. Felicia felt this urgency too, an almost physical pressure as they uncovered the extent of the sabotage, altered communication logs. False alerts, sent to patrol units, strategically leaked information that placed innocent people in danger to cover up deeper moves. It was no longer a question of whether the traitor existed, only who they were, how deeply they had infiltrated, and what the final stage of their plan would unleash. As Anna and Felicia pushed forward, the sense of crisis escalating beyond their control grew heavier, as though the city itself were shifting under the weight of invisible hands. Anna understood that she was carrying more than a secret. She was carrying the key to a transformation already, unfolding a reordering of power and loyalty that would reshape Port Charles once exposed. Finding the traitor was not merely about justice or revenge. It was about preventing the next engineered disaster, one that had already begun gathering momentum, fed by the silence of those who trusted too easily and questioned too late. And Anna knew, with a clarity sharpened by pain, that the moment they identified the betrayer, the entire city would change. Because betrayal inside the PCPD was not just a wound, it was a fracture line, and the moment it cracked open, everything hiding beneath it would come spilling out. Anna moved through Port Charles like a woman resurrected not into peace but into purpose, carrying inside her a storm sharpened by months of captivity and psychological mutilation. A storm that refused to quiet until every piece of what Sidwell and Pascal had done to her was answered with an equal and devastating force. Freedom had not undone the damage. If anything, it had crystallized it, shaping her into something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous than the broken prisoner they believed they had left behind. The fragments of memory that once tormented her were no longer chaotic. They were aligning, forming a map of betrayal, cruelty, and orchestration that pointed toward a single truth. Her tormentors had never intended to kill her outright. They intended to control her, to hollow out her sense of self until she became a weapon molded by their hands. But in their arrogance, they had miscalculated, believing the mind of Anna Devane could be redirected like one of their experiments, never realizing that every hallucination, every sensory distortion, Every induced nightmare had only deepened her resolve to break them. It was within this new clarity that she uncovered the existence of a traitor embedded within the PCPD. Someone who had not merely assisted her captors, but had designed the silences, the blind spots, the bureaucratic fog that allowed her disappearance to vanish beneath layers of false leads and misdirected investigations. Realizing that betrayal had burned away the last remnants of hesitation inside her, she was no longer working to survive. She was preparing to execute a plan of vengeance so precise that it bordered on surgical. Her mind, once fractured, now operated with chilling discipline, weaving together strategy after strategy with an intensity that alarmed even Felicia, who had always known Anna capable of extraordinary focus but had never witnessed this version of her, a woman who analyzed every detail not for justice but for retribution. This transformation, subtle at first, grew more pronounced each day as Anna traced Sidwell's financial networks, dissected Pascal's movements, and began reconstructing the hidden architecture of the conspiracy that had taken root both in Windermere and inside the very walls of Port Charles law enforcement. She no longer spoke of exposing them, she spoke of eliminating them, of cutting away the rot with her own hands if necessary. And there was something haunting in the calmness with which she described what she intended to do. Felicia saw the danger immediately. The moral center that had once anchored Anna was shifting, tilting toward an abyss formed from everything they inflicted upon her. But Felicia also understood that trying to stop her outright would be futile, perhaps even perilous, because Anna's pain had evolved into a kind of weaponized clarity, a dangerous form of single-minded purpose that left no room for negotiation. What terrified Felicia even more was that Anna seemed fully aware of this transformation and was no longer resisting. She embraced it, wearing her darkness like armor, moving through each day with the controlled intensity of a predator, waiting for the precise moment to strike. And the deeper she dug, the more she realized Sidwell and Pascal were not acting alone. Their network extended outward like a web, threading through institutions she once trusted. Every discovery confirmed her suspicion this was not just corruption, it was a coordinated recalibration of power, a restructuring that used fear, manipulation, and psychological warfare as its foundation. If she allowed them to continue, the city would fracture under the weight of their influence, and justice would become a meaningless word. This realization accelerated something within her, a shift from reactive anger to meticulously calculated retribution. She began planning in silence, mapping escape routes, surveillance patterns, weaknesses in their operations, and potential points where she could destabilize their network with minimal collateral damage. But beneath all these calculations lay something darker, an obsession that had taken root inside her, an obsession that neither Felicia nor anyone else could untangle. It was not the kind of fixation born from hatred, but from the haunting certainty that eliminating Sidwell and Pascal was the only way to reclaim the pieces of herself they had tried to dismantle. And yet, as Anna descended further into this grim resolve, she felt an equally powerful truth stirring within her. Once she crossed this threshold, there would be no return. She would no longer be the woman who had upheld the moral codes of the WSB, the agent who once believed justice could be pursued without becoming the monster she hunted. Instead, she would become the architect of her own brand of justice, a justice shaped by the cruelty she had survived. But even with that knowledge, she moved forward. Her trauma had become a compass, her rage a form of clarity, and her pain a reservoir of strength. The boundaries she once respected were dissolving, replaced by a new internal law to destroy the architects of her suffering before they rebuilt their empire through the minds of others. Felicia, watching helplessly, realized this was not merely about vengeance, it was about control. Anna was seizing control of a narrative that had once imprisoned her, rewriting its ending with her own hand. And the terrifying part was that she seemed prepared to pay any price to achieve it. The threat of Sidwell and Pascal was no longer external. It lived inside her memory, inside her bloodstream, inside the fractures of her psyche, pushing her toward a reckoning that felt both inevitable and catastrophic. Because if Anna succeeded, she would dismantle an empire of manipulation that threatened the very stability of Port Charles, but if she failed, she would lose the last fragment of herself untouched by darkness. And the truth neither woman could ignore was this: Anna Devane was no longer simply preparing for war. She was becoming the war itself, a force shaped by trauma, sharpened by betrayal, and propelled by an obsession that would not rest until every last piece of what Sidwell and Pascal built was reduced to ruin.